Good afternoon, Scott Latifi Live. Welcome to today's recap. So very muted day in the indices, but a lot of undercover action that was decent for the active trader and also for the guys that are holding on to some macro positions. First things first, take a quick look at the SPX. You will see that still somewhat sideways. I would say this pattern is pretty overall in a macro sense, very bullish considering where we came from on June 4th. On an intermediate sense, the longer we continue to go sideways, the more it'll negate this outside day that we saw on Tuesday of last week when we pushed through the prior high of 1422, came back below, and then yesterday you had a little bit of, you opened up higher, went lower, but it's really, the market seems like it's on hold until we see what, Big Ben has to say on Friday, and then, what goes on with the ECB early September. September 6th is a pretty big day. So all in all, we're still above this recent low of 1398, hovering sideways. But in the midst of that, a lot of good action. Today a lot of guys had nice success with Google. Yesterday the news was, or over the weekend, that Apple won the Samsung case, sweeping victory. And I said, well, let's see what happens with Google if it's buyable into 660. And then it showed relative strength. At the end of the day yesterday, I'm like, I think that it's constructive. It closed a big portion of this gap. We made some nice money cash flow. I say open down. The price point sheet, we had 672 for continuation, and then it closed near the highs of the day. Overall, I know conceptually we also talked about how I think that Apple doesn't go after Google because they don't want to all of a sudden get the monopoly talk. They have enough of a stronghold that, yes, let the Android exist, let some other phones exist. They need some competition. Otherwise, all of a sudden, there's too much scrutiny. Anyway, you go to the chart here, Google investors obviously not worried. This was, after earnings, and this was a nice little buy, and then strategically has been going higher. If you want to look momentum-wise, it's hanging out up here. I would say anyone that's short Google will need to cover this thing. We close and trade through 680. It's off to the races. And then you go back to the monthly chart, and the monthly chart is where I originally thought it would go, in the beginning of the year, but it's taken some time. But there's your 747. This was 2007 when all it was search. And we're about, 5 years later or something like that, and it looks like we're on our way. So Google still looks great on every time frame. Last 2 days, cash flow. Apple just hanging out. I guess a lot of people were expecting better action or a little spoiled. I guess I'm a little spoiled because I was thinking that we would just continue real quickly. But overall, this was it opened up above the prior high here of 670.48. It's taking time to let the 8-day catch up. Today we tried it twice. First time through 673.54. I got stopped out at the low of the day. Tried it again. Still in that position. I am in small. I think that for Apple, really, you could look at it like this. This was the last time this type of pattern happened. A little bit different. Where remember it gapped up, closed near the lows, went through the prior day low, gave you a doji, and then it continued. So we'll see if that's the case. If that's the case, tomorrow we'll see where we open, and then you could add to your Apple position above 670, 610 if that happens, and then you have the high here of 680.87. Might take a few more days to consolidate. Who knows? But at this point, it's extended from the 8-day. Looks great on every macro sense. Here it took about 4 days to reconvene, so to speak. Let's see how many days it takes here. Right now you have a new point of reference. That point of reference is 670.67. Let's see what happens thereafter. I still think it looks great and worth sticking with. Amazon, still very choppy, but if you've been giving it room, there were two different areas it should hold. It did it both times. Amazon first trade was when it triggered above right here, this 228, 230. Nice move, came back, retested, then it went again when it triggered through this 238, 240. Came back, tested, continued, and now it's still on its way. More momentum will come in above 247.50. You have the all-time high, which if you're short and it goes through, I know that people would definitely be a little shaky here. Actually, I think it's through it. So this still acts very well. I trade this a little less just because I don't trade Amazon that well, but it still looks good. LinkedIn finally paid off some of the subscribers with us that have been watching it. We've been talking about 107. So some guys were buying it in this base here as it held 104. Today closed on its highs, looking good. Perhaps it's on its way again. This is not the Facebook you're looking for. It's not the social media. It's had 3 quarters of really good earnings, and it's been priced right. You look at the overall chart of it, it's got a lot of institutional interest now. It's holding higher above, moving averages, and I think this still can go higher. Yes, just don't have as much as you would have of something else, but you could stick with it. And today on a micro level, nice trade, okay? And I do think that a day like today, it should continue. It closed near the highs. Good book says take it long. We'll see what happens as perhaps it continues. Guys were asking me about Facebook today. I don't know why. I took a little bit just for, I guess, S's and G's. There won't be those if we go lower. But here is that 1875. We're still holding versus that. Today was a green day. We'll see. Really, I don't know what it's going to take for this thing to change composure. But at this point, you have this downtrend that's been intact for a while. I guess if you were long versus that 1875, the real price to add to it would be a lot of action, a lot of volume above 1973, 1980. For maybe, like if you look here, it was pretty lethargic also. Once you had this little bottom type thing before, shorts got a little worried and then it stretched. Could this happen here? Maybe. It's worth a look. It's worth keeping on the radar. Breaks 1875, trades off, but we shall see. As far as Lulu, I think some guys were talking about that. It kind of continued a bit. Home Depot, what were you doing here? Still in this flag, a little choppy, but it's still okay. Some guys were mentioning Walmart today. Walmart, after the missing on earnings, look at this. I drew this line a few sessions ago. Still intact, still above the 50, trying to fill some of its gap. This was your entry. This was that big move that we talked about above 62. Hit the target of 75. Right around here, and then you had earnings, but it's pretty much taking it in stride. So at this point, I think staying in a tier 1, Walmart looks good. What's Target doing? Target still methodically moving along, but choppy like everything else. And really, I'm not going to get in. There's not much to talk about. Gold and silver still hung around, a little choppy, but what do you expect after last week's strength? I do think that strength should give us more follow through, but definitely take trades along the way. And it's the last week before Labor Day. There is some selective movement. Don't overtrade, but if you pick the right spot, granted, Apple's been a tough trade since the Friday. You had to own it overnight, but unless you were shorted, and even if you were shorted yesterday, still wasn't the easiest trade. Where Google was an easier trade, from an active trader's standpoint, because it opened down, closed really relatively well yesterday, opened down today. You could have bought it, and this time closed strong. So sometimes some of these things are more conducive just for the macro investor that are sitting tight and holding, and sometimes there's a lot more intraday opportunity. And lately, Google gave you a good intraday opportunity. Today, LinkedIn gave you a good intraday opportunity. Amazon and Apple still is working off that big gap, so maybe they take turns, but make sure to keep that on your radar. Banks just hanging around, and just the market's really hanging around. We're still in that upper range. We know levels on a micro and macro level to look out for support and resistance, and we'll see as we get closer to Jackson Hole on Friday, what to look for. Unfortunately, I am going to be leaving tomorrow. Probably mid-afternoon, and I will be out Thursday and Friday. I will not really be tweeting. I won't be writing in, taking a real few days off to spend time with the family. So, if I were you, I would take some summer schedule too. If the last week of the summer, we've had a great August, a lot of activity, a lot of movement. I know some of my traders had their best month. I'm not sure, don't quote me, I might have had my best month of the year before today on the highs of my year. So it goes to show you can continue to take trades, move around, and you don't have to be on the highs of the year in order to be at the highs in your trading year, because you're allowed to be short, you're allowed to do things and maneuver for different time frames. And if that's you, take some time, switch some gears, do a little less. And if you didn't have the month that you wanted to have in August, don't try and play catch up now when volume's light and put yourself in a bigger hole when things could get a little bit more volume come September. We have a lot going on in the next few weeks. I don't think everyone's like saying, oh, we're going to get a 10% correction in September. Let's see if we can get below 1398 first and close below there before you start talking about 10%. And then we'll see what happens at 1375, the 50-day, or 1371. So I kind of hate those guys who just throw out the generalizations. Oh, we're going to go down 5 to 10%. Big difference between 5 to 10%. 5% or 3 to 5% or maybe 5 to 7%. Oh, but to throw out, we're going to go down 5, 10, maybe 15%. Well, how do you say something like that? So anyway, we'll cross each bridge when we get there. We'll use our tier system to try and limit risk, stay with what's moving around, and hopefully you've had some success. Scott Riley, T3 Live, the recap. See you tomorrow morning at the call with Lindsay. Have a good night.